We still have a couple coming in the waiting room, Mrs. DeBoer. I don't know if you want
Okay.
to wait just a moment.
I will wait a moment.
We are at 37 and I'll keep on watching the door.
Okay, so I will reintroduce myself. I'm Patty DeBoer, Superintendent in Mashpee, and the purpose of this Zoom is to provide information to all attendees with respect to sort of the medical side of COVID as it impacts our schools. And in particular, we were going to talk about a pool testing program that is a potential to come to Mashpee. We're still exploring it. Also, any updates on vaccines, and then any specific questions that families or staff members might have about COVID. We do or should have, I believe, Dr. Parkinson. I don't know if he's on here yet, but we have Greg Parkinson is our district physician. And most of you know Stacy, who is our district COVID health coordinator. I believe our school principals are all on board: Mary Kate O'Brien, Mark Belstracci, and Deb Goulart. Jamie Curley is here as well, Director of Special Ed. I believe our nurses are here. So there's a general brain trust here who hopefully will be able to answer your questions. If you have any questions, you are going to use the chat, and all of the questions are only going to be seen by me. And then when we get ready to do the question and answer portion, I'll read the questions for everyone. That way, if you feel, you want a little bit more confidentiality and don't want people to know that you're asking the question, no one is going to know who the questions are coming from. So feel free to ask. And then I think I said today in the email, you can always send questions after tonight as well, and we'll make sure we get back to you if we don't have the answers. So anything else I should be at? I think everyone is on automatic mute. So if there's something that you want to say, unmute yourself, but generally we want the conversation to be through the chat. So there's a little bit of a presentation, I believe, that Stacy and Dr. Parkinson are going to do. And then we'll see where our conversation takes us. So I guess we're going to start with a little bit of a video from another school district. And the first topic we are going to speak about is pool testing. And I do want to say there are a lot of layers to this, and we are exploring and learning about it ourselves. And whatever program we end up bringing to Mashpee is totally voluntary for participation by students. And that can only be done with parental consent. And then staff members, it's totally voluntary as well. If, we're not making anybody participate, it's everybody's personal preference and comfort level with, whether you want to know on a weekly basis, whether you are positive or not, or negative. It depends on what's going on in your world. So, but just to keep emphasizing, it's not a finalized decision. We're not in the final planning stages. We're just still out there learning the most that we can. So I guess it was Jamie that was going to start up with the quick little video. Which, when we tested this, can everyone hear this?
It looks like it's muted.
Yeah, I personally cannot hear the movie, although 5 minutes ago we could.
It's been an unusual time.
Okay.
This has tested all of us in our work.
Can you hear it now?
The way we do work, the way we do school is fundamentally different than we've ever had to do it before.
I think that this year has been one of the hardest years for a lot of teachers in teaching.
What we are doing is being very careful and making sure that we are doing everything we can to keep our schools open and make in-person learning possible for our kids, while also trying to make sure that our adults and students are safe. Testing enables this additional layer of finding the virus before symptomatic students might show up or staff might show up, and adding a layer of protection against the spread in schools.
I'm a proponent for, pool testing as much as possible, because I think it helps to identify, pockets of outbreaks sooner. So certainly if we can eliminate, opportunities for spread by testing whole groups of people, I think that that's something that's a benefit for us.
So in homeroom, our students, after they get their bags away, jackets away, get out their Chromebooks, they'll sanitize their hands, grab the swab, put it in their nose 4 times in each nostril. They will then place the swab in the tube, sanitize their hands, sit back at their desk.
We believe that in-person school, giving families that option and giving our children the option of coming into school in person as much as possible is in their best interest.
We can be more proactive about what is happening and what we can control to make sure that everyone's as safe as possible.
For right now, it's just been a pilot, and we've had parents actually involved in this as citizen scientists and helping to figure this out.
I'm hearing from the staff who have been in the classroom that the kids are interested, that they feel, excited about the chance to, participate in research and move something along.
We don't know when the vaccine is going to be available to us. We don't know when our teachers and then ultimately our students will have access. And so we think for the remainder of the school year, having a testing protocol is critical to our ability to continue to function as a school district.
Okay, so that was just sort of a brief overview of an experience that another district in Massachusetts is having. And just so you know that at the end of that, you saw it said Concentric by Genco. That is the, I guess, test provider or test partner that is the group assigned to Mashpee. And I don't know if I said this, but we are investigating this because through the Department of Education in Massachusetts, they offered a 6-week program fully funded to districts to do this pool testing. And it's designed to, like they said in that video, to catch individuals potentially before they start to show symptoms, but they're carrying the virus. And so this program is for 6 weeks at no cost to the district. However, because of the amount of time it takes to sort of roll it out, if we do continue to do it or we do pursue it, we have a March 15th sort of as a target start date. That will only allow us to be funded by the Department of Education through the middle of April. So there is, ongoing costs if we continue to do it weekly. And we have different avenues to explore for that. And the Department of Ed is also working with FEMA, and there's a strong likelihood that they're going to be picking up that. But anyway, the reason we're doing this now is because of this program offered through DESE. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Stacy.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stacy Skokel, the Mashpee Public Schools COVID Health Coordinator. And as we just watched the video, I'm going to share my screen. We did put together a little presentation. As you can see, and as you've heard, we're in the process of exploring this program. So as you heard in the video, pool testing is on asymptomatic individuals. So people, again, who are not symptomatic. So it is not to come to school sick to do any testing. Our same protocols that we have in place where you stay home if you're sick, following up with your healthcare provider, and all those things will stay in place. All of our protective measures that we have in place stay in place. But what pool testing does is it adds a layer of, again, as Mrs. DeVore said, looking at seeing if there are individuals who are asymptomatic with symptoms that generally are not as contagious when you're asymptomatic initially, that we can do some testing ahead of time to catch things early. And it's a PCR test. As you all know, when we request testing, it's a PCR batch test. So it's a pool of a group of people. Again, it's a layered piece of protection, and it can be done in schools, and that's what it is designed to do. As we said, permission is required for students and staff. It's purely voluntary. So we are in the exploring stages and trying to make a plan, but not knowing what we have for interest. So we wanted to get information out as soon as we were able to know that we were matched with the provider and what our program would look like. As you saw in the video, it literally is a Q-tip. Sorry. that is done in the anterior part of the nose, so in the front. So if you've had a COVID test and the one that goes all the way up to somebody, it feels like sometimes people say it tickles your brain. That is not this. Individuals, as they are developmentally able, do it themselves. DESE guidance says that grades 2 and up, for the most part, can do their own swab. So I'm not going to do it on camera, but 4 times in one nostril, 4 times in another nostril, just in the lower part of my nose, and then it gets dropped into a test tube. All testing protocols and doing the testing is done by staff that are doing this program. So teachers are not doing it, but if an individual is participating, they are swabbing themselves if they are able, and if they're not able, we will be providing that assistance without any issue that way. Pooled testing is best done in groups. So if you think about, we set up our schools to have cohorts. So our goal is to have a classroom type pool if we get parents that are interested in having their children participate. And if it's a classroom type setting, if a classroom teacher wishes to participate, that would be a pool. Our test pools are set up to be 10 people in a pool is what we're looking at this time. They can be as low as 5 and they can go higher. The company we're working with advises 10 if we can. And again, in a pool setting. As you all know, we contact trace. All these things are going to stay in place. But when we have a cohort, we look at who are close contacts. So if you pool test in a cohort, then that also allows us to know who our close contacts are and do what we need to do should there be a positive result. Again, not every pool will have a positive. You'll see in a few slides, it generally is a low percentage of asymptomatic positive test results, but in the event that we do get a positive test result, as it says here in number 3, it's followed up with Binex Now, which is an antigen test, which you heard back in the fall about some antigen testing with symptomatic individuals. Again, these are individuals now that are asymptomatic. But if I have a positive in this pool test, those individuals, and right for tonight, we're going to say 10 individuals, again, you're going to still come to school, you'd still be coming back, you'd be notified that there was a positive pool result, and those individuals would still be in school, would come to a location and have a Binex Now test, which is again, another Q-tip type swab that we would actually be doing with the protective equipment that we need. And it's a rapid test that's done right there with results 15 to 30 minutes, depending on what you read. So we say 15 to 30. And then we should learn who the positive individual is from that test pool. And again, that's kept confidential and done in a manner to respect that. If you test positive in that pool, then you are going home and isolating, but we are identifying someone who's positive before they are symptomatic, and viral shedding is the theory for that, to do it early testing and early detection. If we do not get a positive test out of that pool, the next day, everyone gets to do another Binex Now test. And if we still don't get a positive out of that, it means that the positive test that we did initially, whomever triggered a positive, it potentially could have been a false positive, which is rare, but could happen. Or an individual was at the end of a positive that they didn't know they had been positive, and there's not enough virus, and no one is positive anymore at this time. And then everybody goes back to their normal activities. But if you're positive, then you do isolate, we contact trace, quarantining starts, and that takes it from there.
Can I add too, I don't know if it's on the next slide, but if within that pool of 10, there is a positive, it doesn't mean that everyone who's in that pool then has to quarantine. What Stacy does then is she does our normal contact tracing, and she identifies who has been within, the 6 feet of that individual for more than 15 minutes in a 24-hour period. So we just need to emphasize that just because you may happen to be part of a pool that comes out positive does not mean those 11 people have to go home and isolate. There's more that has to be done after that.
Correct. So we look back 48 hours for contact tracing, and then we would take it from there. So correct. And again, even with pool testing, we are still doing our 6 feet, masks, hand hygiene, ventilation, all of those strategies are still in place. So this is just another added tool to use. The video link is in this. We will be emailing out this presentation if you wanted to watch that again, so it will be available. I thought I would just go over some frequently asked questions that may or not been answered enough in the video or what we've said so far. Again, it's a really not invasive type of test and swab, and it does give us information as to what we are looking at in our community. It is an accurate test. So again, I won't read all the slides, but as you know from all of our information we send out, we request a PCR test because those are the gold standard type test. So again, this is also a PCR pool test. So it is really sensitive and very few false positives. Again, the swab is soft. It's like a Q-tip. It does not hurt. You saw in the video, kids do it. I've spoken to a few districts that are starting to pilot it throughout the state, and kids are actually really liking it. They feel like they're actually contributing to some information and learning. So that's been really neat to hear. If someone has recently had COVID, you do not participate in pool testing. That does not mean you can't sign up, but if you are interested and you know your child or you yourself has recently tested positive, we will be asking and looking at that information prior to starting, but you would not participate until you have completed your 3 months of having been positive, and now they're actually saying up to 90 days to 180 days is actually what the new guidance that came out this week. So the reason for that is if you have been recently positive, you are still viral shedding or having virus in your body, I should say. And then that would give us a false positive. You're no longer viral shedding. That was wrong word to use. I apologize. You're no longer contagious, but you can still have the virus in your body and it would trigger a positive result. We want to make sure that we aren't doing that for obvious reasons. Again, we talk about molecular versus antigen. So the pool testing is a molecular test, that PCR, and then we do follow it up with the Binax Now antigen test. And the rationale for that is if we know we have a positive pool, an antigen test will pick up someone who is currently positive. Again, the accuracy is there. As far as false negatives, the program and the protocols that are being used have a really good control set up to make sure that we're not getting false negatives either. There's a lot of research on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed website. If you search DESE or Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed, COVID testing or pool testing, you will be brought to a whole bunch of articles, links, presentations. So there's a lot of information there if you'd like additional information. Been getting a lot of questions about if you are someone who has had the vaccine. So again, if we have staff that are interested in participating, again, it's all voluntary. If you have had your vaccination, you may still participate in pool testing. Again, being vaccinated does not give you COVID. So you are definitely able to do that. And for questions about vaccinations right now, they're approved to 16 and up, depending on which vaccination. So again, obviously that won't apply to our students in preschool through till they're 16 years old. But adults, if you have had it, you may participate. And again, I want to totally stress that this is just a piece of this COVID playbook, as I call it, to make sure that we're accessing and doing what we can to monitor our community, keep everyone as safe as we can, and have as much data and current information that's available. So again, we're still going to be masking appropriately, physical distancing, we're still doing 6 feet. That is the gold standard through CDC. Hand hygiene, our cleaning continues, ventilation, contact tracing, isolation and quarantine. Should there be a positive, all of those things stay in place. Whether you participate or not, none of that changes. And then the gold standard of this is if you are sick or have any symptoms, and that includes a stuffy nose that you just think is your normal allergies. And I do want to stress, we're coming into spring season. If you or your children have seasonal allergies, please make sure you're managing those now because COVID symptoms mimic allergies. So just really monitoring and keeping ourselves as healthy as we can. And again, if we're symptomatic, please stay home. This website is also going to be available to you. It is the company that we are matched with through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. They have a ton of resources, information, lots of things that you can find if you have other questions that we don't answer tonight or after this presentation. So I'll stop sharing my screen and see if there's questions in the chat.
And
Dr. Parkinson, I think, is here if he has something to add.
Yeah, I'm going to look in the chat. I don't know if Dr. Parkinson wanted to say anything.
No, I think Stacy's covered it very thoroughly, and you know, I mean, the main thing to think about here is that it's, as she said, just another tool in the armamentarium of trying to keep the schools safe, and it is, you know, it is something that's, you know, there'd probably be a little bit of a learning curve with, you know, the first week or two in terms of trying to make sure that, you know, that things go smoothly. I think it's important that, you know, if it gets done, you know, get done in a smooth way so that it's minimal disruption and hopefully timely way that get results quickly so that you know, people can feel like it's a positive.
Right, and I think, like Stacy emphasized, you're getting a snapshot in time when you participate in this pool. That just tells you as of, you know, Wednesday, you know, you don't have it, but the following week you participate in the pool again. It's a whole, you know, it's another snapshot in time in your life. I have one question that was emailed to me before tonight, right before tonight. It's for Dr. Parkinson. The question is, what information is available regarding the prevalence and severity that children with underlying respiratory conditions have experienced COVID-19? I would like to know specifically about children that have viral-induced asthma, i.e. colds, are triggers for asthma, if possible.
So that's an interesting question, and the answer is probably not exactly what you would expect. You know, most of the powers that be, CDC or whomever, list asthma as a risk factor for more serious COVID. You know, well, that may be true in adults. In children, what evidence there is very reassuring in terms of, you know, in terms of kids with asthma and COVID. I think the, you know, the way I describe it in, you know, just at a basic level is that if you're a kid getting COVID, you're 110 miles from the volcano if it erupts. If you're a kid with asthma, maybe you're 100 miles from the volcano. So in other words, you're maybe statistically more likely to have a problem than somebody that doesn't have underlying asthma, but still the likelihood is very low. So the surprise part of this is that remember that the flu and other respiratory viruses are a much bigger risk to kids with respiratory problems than COVID is. And so what's happened in children because of mask use and the reduction in those other viruses, including the flu and flu immunization as well, is that we're actually seeing less complications of asthma this winter in children than we are in a regular winter. And so it's just really important to keep perspective that COVID is not the virus that we worry about in children, although you hear the rare situations where a child has a severe complication. That can happen with any illness. It can happen with with poison ivy. It could happen with anything minor you think of. I can tell you a way that it can have a serious complication 1 in 100,000 times. And so COVID has that, but the likelihood of serious problems with COVID in children is lower than the likelihood with the flu. And because the flu is way down, children are actually doing better this winter than they have in the past.
Thank you. Okay, here's a question in the chat. I have been reading about school pooled testing. So is it also checking for SARS-CoV-2?
Great question. So they are actually one and the same. So yes, that is what COVID-19 is also known as.
Okay. And yes, anyone can put in questions in this chat anytime throughout this. I'm just reading some of the comments right now. Here's one. If you are vaccinated, what is the benefit of participating in pool testing?
Great question. So again, vaccination is another piece of our playbook strategy, and we strongly encourage it for those of us who are eligible, able, and when we are able. Again, herd immunity, that's what we're going for. As even with the flu vaccination, though, nothing is 100%. So you can still test positive or contract COVID, even if you've been immunized, although your risk is less after you've been immunized, but also depending on where you are. So if you've had depending on which vaccine you also get, whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson, when that becomes available, you need to make sure you're fully immunized. Even when you are fully immunized, you can still, again, test positive for COVID. So it's just another pool testing, or testing is another piece and another layer into that.
Thank you. Will testing take place within the child's classroom like in the video?
So great question also. So again, we are literally learning as we're bringing it to you. When I say hot off the press, it gives it new meaning this week. We don't really know 100%. We have, and if you go into this Concentric by Ginkgo school website, they have models for every option of where you can give it and how. It is honestly going to depend on what we have for participation. If we do move forward, who's participating, who our pools are. It could be a variety of different scenarios and locations. I don't have a specific at this time, but if any of you know me, I've looked at all the options and are being able to plan accordingly to whatever best meets everybody's needs with the least disruption, safest, most effective, and we're taking all that into consideration.
Yeah, and I think what Stacy had said, once the letter and the consent forms go out to parents, and we know that, I'm going to say, in a particular third grade classroom, 9 or 10 kids want to do it. Obviously, that could be handled in that location in some way. But if the result is it looks like 2 kids from every third grade classroom want to do it, then that's a different sort of setup that we would plan for. So we don't really know yet, in terms of each of the schools, what it's going to look like, but we do, like Stacy said, want to be, the least obtrusive to learning and what's going on in the classroom as we can be. So more to come when we figure that out. What determines a pod? Proximity, ? Number of people, ?
All of the above.
Yeah.
So again, it's going to really depend on what our data looks like. So just like when we contact trace and all of that, we look at all those points. So once we know, we will be able to better identify. We're going to go again with the least disruption, most organized, whatever scenario will make it the safest and most effective use of the data that we're getting. Again, we're going to just look at all of that.
Okay. One of the questions is around providing clarification clarifying the positive pool test result and the time frame for identifying the positive individual, who needs to quarantine and for how long. And maybe, Stacy, in our minds, we were thinking that Monday would be our pool test day. So 10 people, let's just use one pool sample, 10 people are in that test, which has the PCR. And then there's a quick 24 to 48 hours, I'm hoping it's 24, turnaround for finding out whether that pool spiked with a positive. And then in theory, on a Tuesday, hopefully, you would be able to have the Binex Now test, which is administered to everyone in that pool. You get those results back in 15 to 30 minutes, is supposedly. And so then we should be able to, either on that Tuesday or the Wednesday at the latest, have identified who those positives were. Could be more than one, or could be just one. And then, like we said, that is when the contact tracing starts, and we go back the 2 days to see who within that pool, or who within anywhere, not necessarily just that pool, because it could be a bus, it could be many places. We would have to contact trace and identify those who are required to, quarantine, obviously, if you're the positive person, but if you're a close contact, which is a different kind of
So it's isolate if you're the positive. And then that's right. Isolate if you're the positive person. And then you would quarantine if you are identified as a close contact. And again, that's based on the parameters that we currently use and consistently use. If you have been closer than 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, and that is 15 minutes in a 24-hour period, either cumulative, so 5 minutes here, 2 minutes there, 6 minutes there, maybe that adds up to 15, however, and 10 minutes there's 15. That's a close contact, or 15 minutes at one time, there's 15 minutes. But we contact trace, we track all of this all the time, every day, and looking at the whole school environment and experience. So again, as Mrs. DeBoer said, bus, recess, lunch, activities, whatever, we take into that consideration. So just because you're in a pool that somebody's positive, you very well may not be a close contact to the person that's positive based on the scenario. But if you are, we're readily identifying the close contacts, and then you would quarantine. As you all know, Mashpee Public Schools is still using 14 days for quarantine because Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, DESE, and CDC tell us that 14 days is the safest quarantine period. So we do use that in Mashpee. If you are identified as a close contact, it's 14 days. If you are the person who is positive in that pool, we said we're going to start with Monday is our goal at this time. But if I'm not giving you and finding out with your Binex Now until Wednesday that you're positive, your day of isolation, first day or day 0, because we start with 0, don't ask why we count with a 0 in this, we do, is Monday. And then we do 10 days from that date, even though it's Wednesday. So you're actually already in 2 days into your isolation that you didn't know about yet, starting on Wednesday. But we also look back to who your close contacts were Saturday and Sunday. And while I'm very well aware that most of you will not be in school Saturday and Sunday, we will help contact trace with you, any family members, friends, or other activities you did the 48 hours from your positive test. But again, by doing it on a Monday, contact tracing wise, exposure wise, you won't have exposed probably many school people, depending on what activity you're doing and who you are in the school environment on Saturdays and Sundays. But we would start contact tracing you from the date of your positive Binex Now test.
Okay, here's a question. I completely understand and respect the need for this. I wonder how the children's anxiety is getting tested, of getting tested will be handled. My kids already are nervous and assume someone has it when they are at school. There seems to be a positive case every day. And just to share a generalized statement about that, most of our close contacts, particularly recently, and I know Stacey would like me to say it, but our siblings. And also we count every kid, every child who attends our school. So they could be considered a close contact because of the sibling relationship, which in some scenarios you might not consider, but because they attend our schools, we're counting them. So there is a tremendous number of that in there. And most of the, cases recently are family connected too.
And that's what we're seeing across the community. Again, that community spread, it spreads faster in a household. And that thinking about it, most households don't set up their environment to stay 6 feet apart 24 hours a day. It just doesn't happen. And any of you who have kids or people that need care, you're in their bubble. You're closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes and you're sharing the same airspace. That's just how it goes. And I don't know about you, but like schools and ventilation and cleaning, my house doesn't always get as clean as maybe my classroom might or office might these days. So there's all those other strategies that just don't happen in a home environment for obvious reasons because we're living. So that is, again, families and those close contacts is correct. And a reminder that we also report individuals, whether they've been in school or if they're remote learners, if it's a Mashpee week, a Falcon week, there are so many variables, but we did make the commitment to report when any students that are enrolled in Mashpee Public Schools test positive, that we would share that information so that we were sharing data on children testing positive. Because when we did close a year, almost a year ago now, children weren't being tested. We didn't know what it was going to look like. So we are being as transparent as we can. And that is another piece.
And just, I do this a lot, but a continual shout out for families who are really doing a great job communicating with Stacy in a very proactive way. So that's very helpful for seeking the guidance and not sort of navigating things on their own. Here's a question.
Can I just go back to, I don't think we answered that question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Before we move on, Stacy, do you have any information from schools who have already adopted it about how the kids are doing with repeated testing,
Yes.
whether
Thank
they're
you.
getting used to it, whether it's causing anxiety, whether it's causing kids to not want to
Yep.
come in, or?
So thank you. And I wanted to make sure we went full circle with that. So
Thank you.
I am not hearing that this type of testing is causing that anxiety. One, I think it's also because it's voluntary. What I have heard and what I am seeing is in initial rollout of programs, it's slow. There may not, like, I'm just using numbers because math is not my thing. So say 100 people participate and sign up first. Then after the second week, when they see how it's happening and kids talk about it, 100 more kids go home and tell their parents they want to do it. And then the third week, 100 more, and then some, and then some. So I am seeing and hearing from my school nurses that I meet with regularly that actually kids are actually liking it and not seeing it as an anxiety provoking piece. And a lot of the science that goes to it, the education that's done with it, it's actually not causing that, which is really good. But we're definitely mindful about that. Again, if someone's not comfortable with it, it's voluntary. If we need to practice, if your child, if you're on the fence, they're on the fence, reach out to me. We will set up a practice. There's lots of strategies in different ways. One-on-one individual will meet people where they're at. So, but again, a great question. And again, as Mrs. DeBoer said, I cannot thank everyone. That goes for families, kids, older kids that can communicate with me directly, and staff. The fact that everyone is being open, communicating, asking questions. We could not do this without that part of this process. And I am truly grateful. So thank you, because it really makes this whole process work.
Right. Okay, so the next question was related to if you're in a pool and there is a positive, would I get the BiNext test the next day and would it be at school?
Correct. Great question. So depending on when we get the results, so we are again told they shoot for 24 hours and they will come and we will be notified in real time. So the goal is that you would be in school the next day. Now I know things can happen. So we again are going to document attendance, track all of that. But yes, so you have your test on Monday. We get notified either Monday night or first thing Tuesday morning of a positive pool. The goal is an assumption is you're there that day, you would be tested on Tuesday. Parents will be notified if we're going to be doing this, of a positive pool. And then we would take it from there. So it would be in school in real time.
Okay. And just so you know, there's 18 new messages, so I want to make sure we are able to get to them. I'm going to read this one. It says, pool testing is a positive development and thank you for all your efforts on this. Can you further explain why is it voluntary? Making this voluntary may result in less effective monitoring of cases because there could be selective acceptance occurring, e.g. opt-outs may skew the families who are less likely to social distance outside of school. Can the school implement random pool testing instead across all students for a better assessment?
So this program, it's clearly established and the guidelines are, it's voluntary. We cannot change that. This is where we're at. We're not there yet for that. Again, this whole process is evolving. We may have a very different conversation in 6 months to a year, but right now, no, it is voluntary. And what we are hoping is that it goes well. We're working really hard, as Dr. Parkinson said, to make sure we do it right. That's why we have not implemented it yet, because we don't have all our ducks in a row. And we are making sure that we have everything in place. We needed to know what we're needing to know. We're bringing it to everyone as we know information, and then we will take it from there. And I will be honest, if we either don't get a lot of input, let's just say 2 people sign up, obviously that wouldn't go forward. So we have to make sure that it's really going to work. And I don't have that information right now. Keep asking questions, but again, we're going to, do the best that we can. And if it doesn't look like it's the right thing, then we might not do this, but it doesn't mean that something else might come down the pike, or that we do this and then something else might develop that gives us a different thing. We are looking at all options at all times on an ongoing basis.
I do think, though, as we move forward, confidence will build and more people would choose to participate. But I would tend to think that at our 3 schools, you're liable to get at least enough for 1 or 2 pools. They may not be like you envision as a classroom with a teacher, but we could at least start and sort of go through the motions to see what we learn from it. One of the questions is about when it would begin and what do we need to get this if we want it. So like Stacy said, we have a target date of March 15th, which the weeks go so fast around here. But anyway, that's 2 weeks. You'll be getting the communication that you need, which will have, and then you'll get an email with an online or electronic consent form that you can choose to do. You'd have to do one for each of your children. You can't do a blanket one for all children. But that's what you'll be seeing in the next week or so, is more information through a letter, and also with some links to sort of learn more, and then that online consent form. Might this be available to all grades, specifically pre-K?
Correct. It is a pre-K through 12 program. And again, I know the video and things say that, 2nd grade and up, if there's a kindergartner that can swivel in their nose, that's great. Pre-K, we anticipate that, we need to make sure it's also done correctly. So yes, and it will be available. We will make sure we do it at everybody's developmental level and meet their needs.
One question was how many pools will be completed in a week? Obviously, if we were to have 100% participation by students and staff, you're talking about 1,800, and that would be 180 pools, right? I'm not sure the capacity to accomplish all of that pooling on one day, but we would get extra staff on board to do that, where you might have a person at each school rather than a person that's visiting all 3 schools. So we'll see where we land. I believe we have the capacity to grow to whatever the demand might be. This one says, I have a similar question for Dr. Parkinson as well, beyond asthma. There have been a number of students testing positive. Can you share in aggregate how the children overall have fared with COVID? Are symptoms mostly mild, as is reported in the news? Have there been cases with more severe symptoms and or long COVID in children? Is there a common theme behind cases that are more severe in children, e.g. comorbidities, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the take-home message is that we're not seeing severe illness in children, touch wood. And so all of the things you've heard about are real things, and they can all potentially happen in children. And the other thing that we're becoming aware of is people that have COVID who have more significant symptoms. We've instituted this return to play policy where you have to go through several days of aerobic conditioning to make sure that you're okay without any kind of cardiac symptoms, in the same way that we've been doing it for years with concussions. That's really the only thing that has drawn any attention in the pediatric world. The younger the child, with the exception of possibly, or maybe not even the exception of possibly the very small infant, it's amazing. Kids get a fever for one day, they get a stuffy nose, they get a little tired, they have very little. And my routine line that I tell people when we're testing them is, the good news is that COVID, in the vast majority of cases, is a very mild illness in children. The bad news is, because of that, we have to test every single child with every significant symptom, because sometimes that's the way COVID looks. And of course, many kids get no symptoms at all.
Okay. Here's the question. Are there PCR tests being used in Mashpee schools? And if so, what is the CT value?
So we do not do any testing in schools. So any testing that is done on symptomatic individuals is done through the labs or the pediatrician's offices. So Dr. Parkinson, I'll defer to you for what offices are using.
Well, there's a whole variety of testing that's being out there. Fortunately, there's more PCR testing out there than there was. And but yeah, it's happening really at the provider or clinic level.
Okay. Next question says, how will it be handled if some kids in a class are tested and some are not? I feel like it will be awkward for the kids who have to test, and some feel lucky that their parents didn't sign them up. I'm just going to say a little bit about that. The relationship that is in place in classrooms with teachers and the classroom climate that's created, that should not really be an issue, because it's a different kind of a safe environment. But I don't know if any principal wants to address that, or one of the staff members who's here.
I'll jump in. We have had in the past a program called Squish, which was a fluoride rinse, and not all students participated. The students whose parents signed them up, they would take that fluoride treatment, and the others didn't. It was done very seamlessly in the classroom. I was the teacher at the time that we had that. So I would see it in a similar way. There's always an adjustment period, but it's the classroom climate and relationships that make the difference.
But we would definitely watch for that.
Yeah.
Next question. If someone in the pool is positive, but those secondary tests show that my child is negative, however, they are still deemed a close contact, what happens to my child?
So again, just same protocol as we do now. If your child is identified as a close contact, they quarantine for the total of 14 days based on date of exposure. So again, depending on what we're looking at for dates, it would be finishing their quarantine. And then we do suggest, when individuals again are identified as close contacts, that they test day 5 or after with a PCR test if they're identified as a close contact.
Okay, is this a program that is coming to Mashpee whether the school district wants it or not, or can the district refuse the pool testing? This is an absolutely voluntary program. We completed the survey, did what we needed to do to have consideration. We weren't even sure we would have been selected because we had no resources to put into the mix, but we were selected. But at any point in time, as we continue to learn about it, we can choose not to do it. We can do it as a pilot during that first initial period covered by DESE and decide we don't want to continue on with it. So it really is our decision in terms of moving forward with it, and then for how long we want to do it. Okay, so next question. Wouldn't it be more effective to individually label the first test so you know who came up positive immediately, like use Ziploc bags labeled with name? The point of the pool test is economics. So to test a group of 10 in one tube is like $50, I believe, or what it's costing. To do individual tests at that stage is much more expensive. So that's why they're doing it this way, to sort of economies of scale and still have some efficiency to it. Although Dr. Parkinson or Stacy could add to that. I'm not a medical person.
You did that well.
Okay. Let's see. Will it be the same group of participants who will test each week they are in school, and if they don't test positive? Will it be the same group of participants who will test each week they are in school if they don't test positive?
Correct. So it's the same pool once we identify our pools, with the understanding that we can add people to the pool. But once you're in a pool, that's your pool. So that we can also, again, for contact tracing purposes and identification and keeping things as scientifically balanced as the program says, that yes.
Okay. From one of our staff members, I understand the goal is to reduce disruption in instructional time, but how long will the training of students take, and how long will the pool testing take, for example, a pool of 10?
So when I spoke to a couple of my colleagues that have been doing the practice run this week, they're saying it is a total, like after the first time of doing the explanation of about 5 minutes, and a lot of them have been using the video, they said they found that helpful. It literally 5 minutes, not even. Everybody gets their swabs, they're labeled with the barcode that they put into a tube. Literally it's 4 seconds, 4 seconds, so 8 seconds, drop your thing in. So it's very quick and seamless once you get stuff.
So if you have 9 students and a staff member, everybody's swabbing at the same time. You're not in a line waiting your turn.
Well, again, it also will depend on like developmental age, who we're doing it. So I can't say that it won't be, because it needs to also be monitored and supervised by the people administrating the testing. So again, it will be case specific and look different developmentally. But again, once kids get used to it, it's tickling with a Q-tip, and but making sure that it's done correctly, because you also want valid samples.
Okay. If you are identified as a close contact and need to quarantine for 14 days, can the individual get tested on their own to reduce the quarantine time?
Another great question. So when you are identified as a close contact, we are following the guidelines that once you're identified as a close contact, you still quarantine regardless of a negative PCR test for the 14-day quarantine. That is the protocol we are following. So you cannot test out of quarantine.
Okay. Can you clarify how the pool system works? How many students will be tested and how often? Which I do think we talked about. Our goal is to test weekly. And right now we're looking at pools of 10. When you go to a bigger pool, obviously the price goes up, as well as the related sort of work that might be involved when you have a positive in that pool. So 10 is the ideal that we were shooting for. And once a week on Mondays was also in our minds what we think might work. One question says, are you able to opt out once the program gets going? Example, if you are getting quarantined quite a bit. Remember, quarantining does not occur because you're part of a pool. Quarantining occurs because you've been identified as a close contact. Maybe not even to someone in that pool, but I think what you're getting at with that is we may be discovering more people who are positive, and that could then impact in that way, might be what she's meaning. But yes, you're able to opt out. You're not married to this commitment.
And if you don't sign up at the beginning, you can opt in at any time. It's a rolling opt-in.
Yeah. How is the Mashpee district certain that no in-school transmission has occurred to date? How is this tracked and measured?
So as we've shared, we do our contact tracing. So when we are made aware of somebody has tested positive for COVID-19, we look back and identify a date of exposure. So if I were to be positive today, and today is Wednesday, and I was not symptomatic, but I had a positive test, I would look back to whomever I've been hanging out with on Monday, Tuesday, and today, and then look for close contacts. They would be quarantined. We would watch and see if they develop symptoms, test positive in their quarantine. Again, Mashpee is using 14 days, again, because that gives us the most assurance that they will remain negative and not transmit. And at this time, anyone that we have identified as a close contact has not tested positive. So we have not had spread in the school community. Again, with sports and close contacts, that has occurred. But as far as in-school transmission for classroom and on school buses for regular school activity, we have not had any of that transmission, but we monitor all of that on a daily basis, literally 7 days a week.
This question, at the high school, how will that work when students have 8 classes total? I think the confusion there is that you're going to be part of one pool. It's not, every class is not a pool. So on Monday, maybe it's period 1, maybe it's period 4, or if it's a day B, whatever day it is, there'll be some sort of determination so that we have regularity from week to week. The question after that is, will hybrid students still be tested on their home weeks? No, you're only tested if you're in school. So in that case, you'd be part of a pool every other week?
Correct.
Yes. Are teachers being offered the vaccine? So we did have a call today with the commissioner, and they expect sort of quite a bit of a ramped up outflow of vaccines, but that is still a challenge. He did say that teachers are in that next round. We're still working really hard to get, my perfect scenario world is vaccines may be distributed at a central location, but then each district gets their share so that, like a hospital, our teachers, our workers do not have to leave to get their shot. It's done easily at each of their schools. I know up in New Hampshire, I just heard of where they were taking basically not an ambulance, but sort of a mobile device, and they were going to the schools to do their staff members. So that we're working as hard as we can. I do not want staff members to have to do the current game of trying to get themselves an appointment. I just want them to, show up. We also want to try to have some ability to control our operations in that, if whoever wants a vaccine, who's a staff member, bus drivers, all of them, on a Friday, you can get one, because you could have some side effects. And then when you have to get your second dose, if we're not doing the Johnson & Johnson or whatever one's coming down the road, that would also need to be timed, because we do have, do have an organization that still has to function. So, but we're working on it, and that's not a great answer, but I don't know if Dr. Parkinson or Stacy have any more. I know the town is working hard as well. The Cape just doesn't seem to be getting, although I don't know who to believe anymore when I read things or hear things. We don't seem to be getting the vaccines that are needed. But I think everything is supposed to, within the next couple of weeks, really ramp up.
And that is what I am hearing from the county and Board of Health calls I sit in on regularly. Again, it's a supply. The infrastructures are there, the people to administer, the plans. If any of you were around for H1N1, all those vaccination clinics, like, we have the infrastructure, we just don't have the vaccine. So as soon as we get the vaccine, that can be administered in a way, again, as Mrs. DeBoer said, in an organized manner, addressing everybody's needs.
I know there's been a very strong push in the public health circles and in the Cape politician circles to try and improve, the relative supply of vaccine for the Cape. Not successfully so far.
Right. And just remember, so vaccines will not be required for staff, but anyone who wants one, obviously, we will support in any way that we can make it happen in the easiest possible way. But also, that doesn't mean you're not going to get COVID, because it just gives you a layer of protection, and you might have a more milder version. It's similar to a flu shot, which you get the flu shot doesn't mean you're not going to get the flu. So it's, not to create, and I could be wrong on this, Dr. Parkinson could correct me. It's not a false sense that, now you're Wonder Woman and nothing's going to get through and get you from COVID. So, but
it is, I think I would just say that it is a substantially, even the least effective of the vaccines is substantially more effective than the flu vaccine. I mean, the kind of rates that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine protection rates that they're giving, 90+% are really excellent. And so, I wouldn't want to bring it down to the level of the flu vaccine because it is more effective by far.
Okay, it's almost 7:30. There's one last question here. Isn't the pool test just a PCR test that does 10 swabs at once, or are they using a different technology for pool testing? My perception is that it is a PCR test doing 10 swabs at once.
You got it.
Okay. So I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. This is recorded. I will share it out again on Friday with my weekly communication. I appreciate everybody being here. I think this is the highest attendance we've had on some of our Zooms. So I appreciate everybody being here. And if anybody has any last thoughts you'd like to share, I appreciate you all being here. Nope. All right. Well, then I'm going to stop recording. I hope everyone has a wonderful
everyone.
evening. Thank you. Thank you, Stacy and Dr. Parkinson.
Thank you.
Bye.